an administrator, writer, consultant, university instructor, and keynote speaker. During the last 20 years, he has made more than 10,000 presentations in 80 countries and has written or co-written 14 books or 9 educational series. As a registered educational evangelist, his self-avowed mission in life is to assure that children are properly prepared for their future rather than society's past. Fasten your seatbelts and strap on your cerebral flak jacket. Counseling can and will be provided. Please welcome Ian Jukes.
Okay, your hands are freezing. Okay. So, are we ready to go? Welcome to the frozen tundra of Las Vegas, okay? Great scenes of frozen American wildlife. All right, so much to say, so little time to say in it. Over the course of the last few years, I have traveled to more than 50 states, to 9 provinces, to 80 international countries. I typically travel about 150 days a year, and I speak to several 100,000 people a year. And I want you to know that despite the fact that I go to glorious places, it's far from a romantic life. This is my usual view of the world. I'm all over the place. I come to places like the Las Vegas Convention Center to do this. And what I'm supposed to do is, I'm supposed to stand up and talk to groups like you because I want to change what happens here, okay? So that it looks a little less like this and a little more like this. And if I can do that, then I can prevent this from happening, okay? Because I want to change what goes on here, okay? And if I can change what goes on here, I can change what goes on here and here and here and here, and God forbid, maybe even here. You understand? And if we change what goes on here, we can change what goes on here. But I understand when I talk to a group like this that I face a great challenge. You see, I look around the room right now, and what I understand intuitively, what I understand unconsciously, is that many of these people in this room, including myself, you know, as students, as student teachers, as teachers, we have spent almost our entire life in the classroom. We have sat since we were 5 years old in what I like to call the edu-centric box. And as a result of that, many of us have had very little opportunity, very little need to understand things that are going on outside of education that hold enormous implications for students and those of us inside of education. And you see, because we spent most of our lives inside this thing called the edu-centric box, it's absolutely certain that almost everybody in this room suffers from the same terrible affliction that I suffer from. It's called terminal PP. And that's not a bladder issue. Do you understand? Terminal PP stands for, and this is a jargon alert, stands for terminal paradigm paralysis. And understand, a paradigm is not 2 dimes. It's not 20 cents. You understand? A paradigm is your mindset. A paradigm is your perspective. A paradigm is the filter through which you look for significance in the world. And the thing is that a paradigm can be incredibly powerful in that it can prevent you from seeing things from other points of view. Let me give you an example of this. Take your hands like this. Oh, come on, the secondary people can do this too. Let's go. Now, when I say go, very quickly what I want you to do is I want you to put your hands together, cross your fingers, cross your thumbs. I said, when I said go, right? Okay? I'll see you after class, right? Ready, set, go. Now look down at your hands. Now how many of you are left thumb over right thumb? And how many of you are right thumb over left thumb? Now is there anyone else out there that is a little bit confused and perhaps needs some remediation in this? Now what I want you to do is I want you to pull your hands apart. And this time when I say go, not before, what I want you to do is very quickly without thinking about it, I want you to put your hands, not just your thumbs, I want you to put your hands back together the opposite way. And despite the immediate urge you'll have to pull your hands apart, I want you to keep them together the opposite way. Ready? Set, go. Oh, hang on a second here. Do you notice something right away? It just doesn't feel right, does it? This is exactly what it feels like when you come up against change, when you come up against strange things. Cross your arms like this. Okay, now try to cross them the other way. Oh, lady, you need help, okay? Now, the interesting thing is that for 85% of the population, how you cross your hands, how you cross your arms, how you cross your legs, you know what? That's actually embedded into your genetic code. You're born with it. The other 15%, that's typically in place by the time you're about 18 months old, and yet something as simple as that can demonstrate how powerful a paradigm, a mindset, a worldview, your perspective can be in preventing you from seeing things from another point of view. Over 90 years ago, then U.S. President Woodrow Wilson wrote this, that it's easier to move a cemetery than it is to change a school, even though they are similar activities, right? And in very much the same vein, Luce also recently commented that it's easier to change the course of history than it is to change a history course. You understand what I'm talking about? So, what I want to do is I want to talk about the challenge of change and what it means for you personally. The challenge of change, what it means for you professionally. I want to talk about change, what it means for you and your family, for you and your students, for you and your community, for you in this nation, for you and the future of your job. Let's talk about change in the new digital landscape. And the bottom line is this. We face a world on the move. We face a world where change has become so accelerated that we only really begin to see the present when it's already disappearing into our past. Powerful new technologies and radically different mindsets are globalizing and disrupting just about every aspect of our world, of our economy. And I know this globalization has enormous implications for our economy. It has enormous implications for our families. It has enormous implications for the future of education. Now let me start by being more specific about the economy and its implications for education. Here in the United States, sometimes known as the excited states, there has been an almost complete disappearance of the factory job and the factory mindset. These jobs have been vanishing from the American economy for decades. Now the question would be, why? Well, you know why? Because they can be done anywhere by anybody. And the problem is, where labor is the cheapest is not here in the United States, but it's in the developing world. And as a result of that, like over the course of the last 20 years, literally millions of jobs have vanished from the American economy. You know why? Because they can be done cheaper by someone somewhere else. Now let me show you exactly what I'm talking about. This is the Danish ship, the Maersk McKinney Moller. It's one of 20 such ships that are already sailing or currently being built. Now the Maersk is longer than a U.S. aircraft carrier. It has a crew of 12 as opposed to a crew of 3,000 for an aircraft carrier. And it travels at 31 knots. And what it does is it transports 18,000 14-ton, 21-foot containers from China to Los Angeles or to Melbourne or just about anywhere else on the planet in less than a week. And in these containers, you see, the Maersk carries manufactured goods and increasingly even perishable agricultural products that are produced in China at a fraction of what it would cost to produce them here in the United States. That's why, and that's where so many American manufacturing jobs have disappeared to. See, much of the work that was previously done here is being outsourced, it's being offshored, and is disappearing from the American economy. And the thing is this, that it's snuck up on us. This has particularly happened in the last decade. Now, there's one exception to this mass exodus of jobs in the United States. That's unless the work is what we call location dependent. Workers whose jobs are location dependent would include people in the construction industries, oil riggers, plumbers, taxi drivers, barbers, delivery service people, restaurant workers, cleaning staff, to name but a few. Because you see, all of these tasks require the workers to be on site to do the job. All of these blue-collar jobs are location dependent. But you see, the thing is, our economy has changed. And you see, in today's economy, if a job involves what's called routine cognitive work that is not location dependent, routine cognitive work is anything that involves repetitive mental tasks. It not only can, but it inevitably will be outsourced. And it's not just blue-collar jobs that are disappearing today. You see, white-collar jobs are often just factory jobs in nicer clothes. Now, routine cognitive work includes people who do things like bookkeeping and taxes, but it also includes data entry clerks, computer programmers, legal researchers, call centers, receptionists, help desks, customer support. Even the people who interpret our MRIs and X-rays do routine cognitive work. And honestly, here in the United States today, if you have an MRI or an X-ray done, there's more than a 70% chance that the analysis of the MRI has been outsourced to workers in Pakistan. Now, the thing is that all of these kinds of workers do the same mental tasks over and over and over again. But you see now, because we live in a global economy, workers in these fields must not only compete with people in the next city or in the next state, they also have to compete with a global labor pool. For example, the Odesk website allows employers to assemble virtual global work teams on a project-by-project basis. And if you go out to Odesk, it's unbelievable. There are literally millions of private contractors around the world in every imaginable white-collar work category. For example, my company put an application in for a program developer in Odesk, and get this, within 20 minutes, we had more than 230 applicants from around the world. In the end, we ended up hiring a guy by the name of Jimmy White from Shanghai. Yeah, right, Jimmy White from Shanghai. Now, what happens is, Odesk's system takes screenshots every 5 minutes of what he's doing, and he counts his keyboard clicks and his movements, okay? Now, here's my question. How many of you feel comfortable with that? How many of you would be willing to work in an office that took a screenshot of what you did every 5 minutes and counted how many keystrokes you made? My answer would be not many, I suspect. Jimmy would, and the reason is because he can live anywhere and he can work literally and figuratively virtually everywhere. So the new reality is that if a job can be outsourced, if it can be offshored, if it can be automated, it's going to be, okay? Because in an increasingly global economy, the one that we live in right now, it's the only way that many businesses can stay competitive. You see, in the new digital landscape, information travels back and forth at the speed of light over global digital networks, and it makes very little difference if the information is going from one desk to another desk in an office on the 3rd floor, or whether it's going from the 3rd floor to the 3rd world. Because really powerful disruptive technologies makes organizing, managing, and collaborating with a global team a simplicity. Work can also be automated. It can be turned into hardware, it can be turned into software, it can be turned into robots. For example, every time you use Expedia or some other travel site to make a hotel reservation or to purchase an airline ticket over the internet, every time you drop your mortgage numbers into a web form, unconsciously, what you've done is you've taken away some frontline, routine cognitive evaluation professional's job. Think about legal software. Think about tax preparation. If a job or a task can be reduced to a mathematical algorithm, it's very simple to produce software or hardware that's going to do it for us, and it's going to do it for us cheaper. And as a result, just like that, that segment of the job, or even the entire job itself, is or is soon going to be gone. Based on the current trends that we're seeing in the next few years, people who need constant managing will not only be unemployed, increasingly they're going to be unemployable. Workers will need to have a completely different repertoire of skills and knowledge and habits of mind in order to not only get, but also to stay employed. Let me show you exactly what I'm talking about. In his book called The Rise of the Creative Class, writer Richard Florida says that you can divide American workers, you can divide the American workforce into 4 basic work groups. The first, in the green, are the agricultural class. You see, in 1900, almost 40% of Americans workers were involved in agriculture. In 2013, automation has reduced that number to about 1% of the workforce, replacing farmers and work animals with machines. And you see, work that used to be done by hundreds of workers and thousands of animals can now be done by one worker and a single machine, or increasingly, you don't even have to have a human being. you can use a driverless robo-tractor that's navigated by GPS systems. Now the second group, in the red, is the working class. These are the classic manufacturing jobs. These are the jobs that only require basic skills to perform. And you see what's happened is the economy has shifted. And those who once farmed, they then moved to man the thousands of factories that churned out the farm equipment, the cars, and the under-industrial products. And Florida's data shows that these types of jobs peaked here in the United States right after World War II, and they've been in steady decline ever since. It's estimated that literally hundreds of thousands of factories have closed in the United States in the past 30 years, and they have thrown tens of millions of people out of work. And by the way, and this is interesting, I think anyways, this decline is not just affecting the United States. In the past 12 months, get this, about 70,000 factories in China have closed their doors, throwing about 20 million migrant workers permanently out of work. The third group, in the orange, are what are called the location-dependent workers, the service industries, the helping professionals, and the routine cognitive workers. You notice here that these types of jobs peaked about 1980, and they're now steadily declining. And this is primarily because, as I'll explain in a couple of minutes, the growing power of personal computers that have taken over some of the tasks that were previously done by human labor. And the fourth group in the pink is what Florida calls the creative class. These are the people that consistently do non-routine cognitive work, and they regularly apply 21st century abstract skills. And you notice here that there's been a sharp uptake in demand for creative class workers here in the United States since 1980. Once again, primarily because of the growing power of the personal computer. Now, let's step back for a moment here. If you look at just the service and creative class industries in America since 1980, you'll see that there's an inverse trend emerging here. And that's because since personal computers appeared about 1980, they have had an enormous impact upon the workforce. Let me explain here. Service class jobs are replaced by technology. Creative class jobs are facilitated by technology. Creative class jobs require skills that cannot be replaced by technology, but only augmented or enhanced by technology. Because what they do is, they don't just require hardware or software skills, they require headware skills, critical thinking, problem solving, decision making, the like. And the thing is this, new jobs are being created in the creative class every single day. Let's just take one simple example. Let's talk about the apps economy. In just over 5 years, 800,000 jobs have been created. Now get this, in 2007, no one would have considered a job as an app developer because the app economy didn't exist until 2008 when Apple released the software developer kit and they opened the App Store. And that was just 5 years ago. And since then, 50 billion apps have been downloaded, and that number, of course, is wrong, okay? And a total of $10 billion has been paid to developers for those apps. This is a new creative class job that didn't exist just a few years ago. Now, one small subset of mobile applications, and the fastest growing one, is gaming. And it's projected within 2 years, by 2015, gaming will generate more than $160 billion of annual revenue, at which point it will generate more revenue here in the United States than gambling does right now in Las Vegas. Now, to create games requires not only exceptional programming and problem-solving skills, but it also involves a deep understanding of art, of sound, of music, of architecture, of anatomy, of composition, of perspective, of color, and an understanding of light and shadow. Here's the question. Is that what our students are learning in schools today? And if the kids don't learn those skills in our schools, where in the world are they going to learn those skills? Okay? Increasingly, in the digital age, the arts, and get this word, applied technical skills, are not only optional, increasingly they're fundamental. They're as important, if not more important, than math, science, and the languages. But I digress here for a second. Let's go back to Richard Florida's chart, and let's convert it to a stack bar like this. Between 1900 and today, you see a steady decline of agriculture in the green at the bottom, and you see the steady growth in the creative class in the red at the top. You notice that in 1900, only 10% of the American workforce needed abstract, creative, cognitive skills. Today, that number is estimated to be 35%, and this number continues to accelerate, primarily driven by disruptive new digital technologies. This number is estimated to reach 50% by the year 2017. 2017 being the year that students that entered grade 8 this year hope to graduate from our high schools. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm going to say I think we got a problem here. Because it appears that it's beyond dispute that our schools were designed for an era where 3/4 of our population were employed in agriculture and manufacturing jobs. The thing is, those times and that world, you know what? They're gone. And they've actually been gone for a long, long period of time. However, the challenge we face is that the same educational institutions, the same instructional assumptions, the same organizational structures, like traditional classrooms, are now operating in a time where 3/4 of our workforce are working in creative class and service class professions, professions that require a fundamentally different set of skills, knowledges, and habits of mind than our schools were originally designed to cultivate. Yet, in this age of no child left no child left behind, our current educational system continues to promote standardized structures, standardized organizations, standardized instruction, standardized content, and standardized testing as the only way to assess learning at the very same time that the economy is almost completely eliminating standardized jobs. And you see, with a standardized mindset of what learning is, what we do is we take every student's uniqueness and we shove it into a one-size-fits-all funnel of traditional learning where we ask students to regurgitate back the right answers. And we continue to use standardized curriculum and standardized tests as the only means to define and determine what it means to be educated in the ever-changing, unpredictable, non-standardized new digital landscape. How can you have a strong vision for teaching and learning and assessment when 21st century skills and learning are assessed by traditional exams? And we are absolutely not being truthful to students and parents when we assure them that if the students master the existing curriculum, that's all they're going to need to be prepared for the rest of their lives, particularly when researchers like Bob Marzano are telling us that today in America about 80 to 85% of the work that students do in classrooms is focused on factual recall and low-level procedures. In other words, what he's saying is that 80 to 85% of classroom work is focused on routine cognitive work. The work that is increasingly being outsourced, is being offshored, or it's being automated, and what's happening is disappearing. Look at this picture right here. I have to tell you, I am a classroom teacher at heart, and this is great. The room is bright, it's colorful, and the teacher, obviously, has all the students participating and raising their hands. But I also have to be the Prince of Darkness here and say, underneath it all, there's a problem. Because you see, underneath it all, the structural model and the learning assumptions of these classrooms are almost exactly the same as they were more than 100 years ago. And you see, 100 years on from this picture right here, in many classrooms, the teacher continues to be the focal point of the room. The kids all sit in desks. Often they sit in rows and columns. Most of the time, the students are expected to work independently. Every once in a while, a student gets to go up to the front of the room and show their work. But the thing is, structurally, the biggest difference in that classroom is probably the color of the board and the class size. See, the new economy doesn't look at all like the economy of 1900. but structurally schools still pretty much look the same as schools did in 1900 or 1950 or 1980. And as a result of that, as my dear friend David Warlick points out, no generation in American history has ever been so thoroughly prepared for the industrial age as the current generation. What we have done is we have taken the industrial age mindset of the traditional classroom as our children's primary place of learning deep into the 21st century. And the reality is this. I know we are trying to do the best for kids. But you see, the current classroom-based educational practices, what we do, they lag far behind when they're measured against the ability of our classrooms to deliver the creative and the agile workforce that the 21st century demands. A workforce that has not only changed, but continues to change in incredibly radical ways. It may be hard to believe, but according to a last month survey, hang on a second, I just pushed myself there, okay. According to a recent American Bureau of Labor Statistics report, by the middle of this century, by 2050, 70% of today's occupations will be replaced by automation. And what's going to be happen is to be employable will require a fundamentally different set of skills than the skills that we have now, because they're going to be needed to operate in an ever-changing economy. And my problem is, and my observation is, that many students are increasingly disengaged from the classroom. They just don't want to buy the product we're selling. And we're losing them. 10, 20, 30, as many as 55% of inner city students who enter grade 8 drop out every year. And the dropout is worse in our rural areas. And I'll tell you this, if we ran a business and 10 or 20 or even 35% of our product was defective, you know what? We wouldn't stay in business very long. It's unacceptable by any measure. In fact, though, that's exactly what's happening. Our students are voting with their feet, they're voting with their minds, and they're choosing to leave. And you see, in the real world, when your clients leave, your business ceases to exist. And you know, the thing is this, it's not just happening at the high school level here in America. It also applies to the ones that we see as our successes, the ones that go on to university. A 2012 report found that, listen to this number, 50% of college students drop out before they complete a degree. Dropout rates from American universities are as bad, if not worse, than they are from American high schools. Students are leaving our schools in record numbers from both high school and university. You know why? Because increasingly they see the disconnect between our focus on content over competency and the constantly changing realities of the new economy and the new workplace. To put this into perspective, my dad worked for the same company for 35 years. Today, we have what I call the Hunger Games economy. It's everyone for themselves. And you see, in this new economy, the idea of having a single career for life is very uncommon. For example, how many of you have heard the estimate that our students today should anticipate that they're going to have somewhere between 4 and 7 careers in their lifetime? Hands up, let me see. See, understand that? That was 15 years ago. The American Bureau of Labor Statistics says that today's generation of students, the students that we're working with right now, should anticipate not that they're going to have 4 to 7 careers, but get this, they're going to have 10 to 17 or more careers, not jobs working in the same industry, but 10 to 17 distinct careers, get this, by the time they're 35 years old. And as a result of that, they're going to have to replace almost their entire body of knowledge several times during their life. That the average length of stay in any job for this generation is only about 18 months. And they point out that having 10 to 17 or more careers is not a sign of failure. It's not a sign of lack of commitment. It's not a sign of lack of self-discipline on the part of workers. What it reflects is the new economy and the new employment reality that all of our students are facing. How many of you worry about your own kids? How many of you wonder what the future might hold for them? You and I grew up in times of relative stability. Kids today grow up in times of fundamental uncertainty. What's going to happen in the next little while, right before our very eyes? Everything has shifted. And you see, in place of the old school-to-work model that you and I grew up with, we're now living in a new age that can best be described as school-to-work, to school-to-work, to school-to-work, repeat. Our students are entering a world where everyone needs continuous upgrading of their skills in order to stay abreast, let alone move ahead in their careers. Where lifelong learning is not going to be optional, it's going to be mandatory. And my point here, and I'm glad I finally have one, is that if education is going to stay relevant in the new digital landscape and fulfill our mandate of preparing our students for their future, not our past, our focus must shift to providing our clients with the skills that they will need to operate in that ever-changing future. We can't just continue to try and sell them skills that they no longer need. And my deepest concern is that without fundamental change, the future of education, an industry that is increasingly out of sync with the needs of our clients, it is very bleak, to say the least. So my question is this: what's the connection between the classroom and these disruptive technologies? The connection is the disruptive technologies, the disruptive innovation is creating a world that is fundamentally and exponentially different from the world that we grew up in, and that points to a future that is going to be drastically and exponentially different than the world that we live in right now. And you see, when you are dealing with disruption, there's a ripple effect. With disruptive forces, there are always consequences, and particularly the way that information distributed has fundamentally changed. New technologies today are digital versions of information delivery systems that we used to communicate back in the old analog days. All right? And you see, our classrooms are wonderful analog information systems where we disseminate information via the voice of a teacher, in stark contrast to the digital multimedia delivery systems available through things like YouTube and Twitter and smartphones and Google. The problem is that when you're in the information delivery system and then the information delivery business, and a better system comes along, like, for example, say, the internet, then you either have to adapt really quickly or you run the risk of going permanently out of business. That's the power of disruptive innovation. And as former GE chairman Jack Welch once commented, when the rate of change outside of an organization is greater than the rate of change inside of an organization, the end is in sight. I want you to think about all the companies that used to exist that don't exist anymore, that are replaced by something new. The dominant players are gone, replaced by someone or something else. And it's not just old businesses. Think about Blockbusters, think about CompUSA, think about AOL, think about MySpace. See, they were all thriving businesses just a few years ago. Now, they're either gone or almost gone, okay? And you see, our classrooms were originally designed to be, and to this day continue to function primarily as information delivery systems. And you see, as parents, as citizens, as educational leaders, we have to understand that if the world outside of education has been fundamentally transformed because of these disruptive technologies and relentless global change, we can't just pretend that education is immune to the fundamental changes that have occurred in information and digital information delivery in the modern world. And although you might not like what I'm saying, and even though you might not feel comfortable with what's happening right now, the new ever-changing economy fueled by disruptive innovation has made fundamental uncertainty and rapid change the new normal. This is not just a temporary anomaly where we'll eventually return back to the way that things used to be. And more than anything else, you understand that denial is not just a verb in Egypt. We can't just pretend that all we have to do is tinker with the existing educational system and everything is going to be all right, because it won't be. We've seen it happen again and again. And this is not personal, it's business. This is disruptive innovation. It's time for organizations like this to acknowledge that we have done a great job with our students and pat ourselves on the back for what we've accomplished right now, and then to acknowledge that the world has changed and to roll up our sleeves and begin to shift our business model, because we must be able to do much more than we're doing right now. And believe me, nobody in this room wants their school or their district or their classrooms or their job to become the next Blockbusters or Kodak or Encyclopedia Britannica. I wonder what people are using paper-based encyclopedias for these days. See, all of these businesses I've described right here, and many more just like them, are gone because they were unable or unwilling to respond to the new market forces and adapt. Don't think that this can't happen to education as well. Don't think that traditional education is somehow immune to the global changes that are happening everywhere out there, because it isn't. That's disruptive innovation. And I'll tell you this, it's coming right at education, it's coming right at educators. Don't say I didn't warn you. So, you can hear that I don't hold strong opinions about a lot of things. Let me summarize. First, these are highly disruptive times for education. Education and educators face multiple disruptive forces now and even more in the very near future. The second thing is that the continued existence of the current educational system is absolutely not assured just because it's always been here. Why? Because the current educational system was designed to meet the specific needs of a specific world and a specific economy that increasingly doesn't exist. The current system was designed to prepare a massive number of people for an industrial society that has all but disappeared. But you see, change in schools is a great challenge because disruptive innovation in education is blocked by traditional mindsets and our traditional paradigms and change resistance, which creates high obstacles to new ways of doing business. The third thing here is that even successful organizations with good people like you and your colleagues who have the very best of intentions to do what's right for your students, you run the risk of disappearing if you don't understand the forces of disruptive innovation that are rapidly replacing an industrial economy with a knowledge economy. Put simply, the power of disruptive innovation forces us to change and learn or run the risk of becoming irrelevant. And at all costs, we don't want to be in the position of doing the wrong thing well. Because you see, there is very little interest, there is very little market for obsolete excellence. This isn't just a matter of education being good at what we do, because we are good at what we do. It's about being relevant to the world outside of school and the present and the future needs of our clients, who also happen to be our students. What's the fourth one? It's really difficult for even existing successful educational organizations like yours to become dominant players in the new digital landscape, because there remains an unconscious comfort with what's always been, okay? Comfort with our unconscious mindsets, our operational assume-asides, our paradigms, our educational blinders. And the last one is, this is a stealth trend. And this is all flying below most people's mental radar. Disruptive innovation is sneaking up on most school organizations. And as the great philosopher Eric Hoffer once said, in times of radical change, the learners inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves perfectly equipped for a world that no longer exists. My greatest fear is that despite our very best of intentions to do what's right for our students, today we are doing a great job of preparing our students for a world that increasingly does not exist. So I asked it before, I'll ask it again. What world are we preparing our students for? Are we preparing them for their future or our past? Because you see, the default future is rushing towards us. The default future will happen in spite of you and your level of comfort or discomfort, okay? Not taking action means that you are accepting the default future. You see, The reason that organizations fail in the face of exponential change is that they are either unaware of the changes that are going on around them, or they are unwilling to respond, or they are so mired in their organizational dogma, their organizational tradition, that they are simply unable to respond to the changes. My hope is that this drive-by presentation has addressed the first obstacle, because now you are aware. Okay? But so the question here is, are you willing and are you able? And if so, this is the time to start. Now, I often say at the beginning of my presentations that my job is not to educate, my job is to irritate. That my job is to provoke you, my job is to prod you, my job is to challenge you, my job is to give you a swift kick in the assumptions. My job is to get you to step back and look at your world from a different point of view. It's represented by this rubber band right here. Here's what I've tried to do in the last 40 minutes. I've tried to stretch your thinking like this. So I'm pulling this rubber band out like this. But you know what's happening? The rubber band is pulling back at me. And whether it's a matter of seconds or minutes or hours from now, eventually what's going to happen is my arms are going to get tired, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to release the pressure. What's going to happen to the rubber band? It went right back to where it was before. Why? Because a rubber band has a paradigm. A rubber band has a comfort zone. A rubber band is a place that it's been for a long, long period of time. And when you release the pressure, it always wants to go back to where it was before. So here's the question. How do you get a rubber band to not only stretch, but stay stretched? That was the audience participation part, okay? Well, you wrap two anchors around it, you heat it, you freeze it, you apply a solvent to it, you try to change the chemical composition. The interesting thing is, even after all that time, when you release the pressure, the rubber band is still going to try to go back to where it was before. So what have I done? I've stood up here for 45 minutes and I've waxed affluent about the need for change. And intellectually, you've nodded your heads. And yes, we live in a new economy, and yes, we have to deal with paradigm paralysis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you nod your heads like this. But as the old saying goes, when the going gets tough, the tough get traditional. And what happens is, at an absolutely unconscious level, we can end up reverting back to the way that things always were. So what I want you to do as you finish this presentation is I want you to think about one action you could take starting right now to begin to move yourself, to begin to move your family, to begin to move your schools, to begin to move your district, to begin to move your community, to begin to move your state, to begin to move your nation from where they are to where they need to be. Margaret Mead, never doubt that a small group of committed people can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. That is the challenge that I need you to leave this presentation with. Now, if you want to talk to me, or if you want to talk to my therapist, or if you want to talk to my attorney or my parole officer, I'll have some business cards up here at the front. And if you write me at the mailing address, which is on the business cards, okay, my blood oath guarantee is that I will get back to you within 1 year. However, if you email me at that address right there, my blood oath is that I will get back to you within 24 hours, usually much quicker than that. I hope some of you will come over and talk to me at the book signing. If you have any questions or concerns or anything like that, bring your lawyer along. We will absolutely take care of it, okay? I want to thank you. I want to thank you for inviting me here. It has been a real honor. I will never replace Diane Ravitch, let me tell you. Okay, I'm not going to try to. But thank you. This is a great conference, and all I can say is stay warm, and thank you for listening. Take care.